Hey friends, it's Stephanie here again with another episode of the Only God podcast, sharing stories only God could write. And today I'm gonna kind of pick up off where I left off. If you listen to the episode about how running got me into college, I shared how I struggled in college, how I was dyslexic, but didn't know that until at the age of 39. And at the end of the day, after switching my major, I don't know how many times I ended up studying psychology with the goal of going into the FBI to be a profiler. And I had always been fascinated with the mind, honestly, serial killers, and on a positive side of people that climb Mount Everest and Navy SEALs and people who just stretch their body and do things that, maybe the normal person wouldn't do. But when you study those people, a lot of it is their mindset and their ability to, think their way through, I guess, the big hard things that they're doing. And so, anyways, when I graduated, I called the FBI and was interested in like, what's the process? What do I need to do? And they told me to go be a state trooper. And that was not on my radar. I had no interest of being a police officer, but I that was like the next step of accomplishing my goal of going into the FBI. And looking back over my life, I was right out of college, early 20s. I was probably 22, 21, 22 when that happened. And even over the last, like 25 years or going back to the state police, I'm often like, did God blind me in moments like just really quickly that I couldn't like get overwhelmed or think about what that actually meant to go be an Indiana State Trooper. I had no idea what the police academy was like, what it entailed, like none of that. It was just like, okay, this is the path that you're on. Be obedient to that next step. And so I took that next step and I applied to be an Indiana State Trooper and got in on my first try and got to the State Police Academy January 2000. So 25 years ago, going up on 26, and it was crazy. Like I will admit it was hard. I still say it was one of the hardest things I ever did. I ended up not graduating, and that's a whole other story in itself. But while I was there, I just met so many wonderful people. And I like to say is there's a reason why they call law enforcement like the brotherhood is because, or at least for me, when I was in the academy, there were three women, the rest were men, a couple dozen men, and they really do become your brothers. It is, they tear you down to build you back up. And at the end of the day is you have to trust each other. You have to trust each other with your life on, maybe on an occasion. And so I got to be really good friends with a lot of the guys in my class. And I would, after leaving the police academy, again, God opened a door. And that was to go work at the state police as a civilian. And while I was there, I got asked to, take over their grants program. And I'll be honest, I was like, what's a grant? I had no idea what it was. And then while I was running their grants program, there was an opportunity to be in charge of police promotions. And I just, again, you'll hear me say this over and over and over on this podcast is like looking back and see the little doors that God opened in your life. Even in that police promotions, it was in the HR division, human resource division. And I had studied business in college, but when I switched my degree to psychology, I didn't have enough credits for a business degree, but I did have enough credits, or I had to take a couple other classes to get a minor in human resource management. And so I did that, not ever thinking I would be able to use it. But again, here, I'm at the state police. There's an opportunity to apply for a job, and I have a minor in in human resources. But it was through that job, I sent memos out anytime there was a job opening or for police promotional testing. And one of the guys in the academy saw my name on that. That was like 2 years after the police academy. And he ended up calling me and we talked on the phone a lot. We sent emails. That was back in the day before like texting and your phone. And we sent emails back and forth. And we went on our first date. I think it was December 27th, 2002. We got engaged February 21st, 2003. We had a secret, like, justice of the peace wedding or marriage, I guess. I wouldn't call it a wedding, at a local park. And it was because he had requested a transfer, which that's going to be very important to this story because I had a job in Indianapolis that I loved and honestly was not willing to move. And as a state trooper, he was able to move. He could go anywhere in the state of Indiana. And so he ended up transferring, and then we had a big church wedding in October. So all within a year, we start dating, we get engaged, we have a secret like marriage, with the justice of the peace, and then we have a big wedding in October. And it was so devastating when I didn't graduate from the police academy and become a state trooper and kind of lost that path of being an FBI agent and a profiler. And really, that path got lost when I married a state trooper. Now, I met that state trooper in that class, that 59th Indiana State Police 59th recruit class. And so I started to see early in life of how only God could take what at the time I considered my biggest failure. It really hung over me. I really struggled with that. And was working hard and always had jobs, but it was like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Stephanie, wanted to do something different. And that was kind of the first, like, okay, God is in control, because I went to the police academy. And while I was there, people always asked me, like, did you have a crush on your husband? And it was interesting. I was talking to another female trooper last week, and we were joking about that, like meeting my husband in the police academy. And we were laughing because we're like, heck no, you're just trying to survive. Like, sometime minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. At least for me, like that wasn't even a thought in my mind. I'm just like, I'm trying to graduate and get through this today, whatever today looked like. And so he and I ended up getting married. Our wedding was October 18th, 2003. And we had, like, there were, my husband's best man was from the police academy with us. So we were great friends with him. There was other guys who we went to the police academy that was invited. And it was just a great, happy time. My husband had transferred. Not that he was really enjoying working in Indianapolis, but it was a good start to our life. And we had no idea what would be coming. And fast forward, so this episode will post on December 22nd, 2025. And but it's still important whenever you watch this, is on December 22nd, 2003, we were lucky that my husband worked a day shift and he had went out to work. So his shift started, we think, around like 6 a.m. I was getting ready. I worked at the state police, so I was getting ready to leave. And it was shortly after he went to work, the phone rang. I was in the kitchen. I'll never forget. I was standing at the sink. The phone rang. It was my husband. And he said something to the effect of, Patrick's been shot. And I don't know if you've ever had a moment in your life where your brain slows down, where everything like you can't process what somebody told you. And he repeated something like, Scott Patrick's been shot and killed. And Scott Patrick was in that 59th recruit class with us. We all loved him. he was quiet, he was sweet, but he kept his head down and, you know, did the work. And I I was grateful. I got to have some, I got to look back at some sweet moments that I had with him in the academy. And his death, murder, he was murdered, changed my life forever, changed my husband's life forever, changed so many people's lives forever. One choice by a man, one selfish act had this ripple effect on Scott's wife. He'd only been married for 2.5 years, I think. Yeah, maybe 3.5. His wife was pregnant, so he never got to meet his child. He was a son, a brother, like I said, a state trooper. So many colleagues loved him that worked with him. Anybody you would talk to would never say anything bad about him. Just talked about how he went out every day, did what he was asked to do, and was a really good state trooper, police officer, servant with a servant's heart. And that just shook our world. And I don't know. I was going to get in today of kind of how it affected us in our marriage early on. But I want to fast forward to my giving challenge. And it's something I'm going to talk about on my next episode, my next personal episode. And God sent me on this journey of giving a gift every day for a year. And I got to see in that journey of some of those gifts of honoring our police officers. There were so many lessons that I learned from Scott's death. And then sadly, in 2006, our lead instructor at the academy, who my husband had, I had, Scott had, he would be killed in the line of duty. And so I started to grow this heart for fallen officers, but their families, and just remembering the importance of when somebody loses a family member, the importance of remembering that person. And in the case of Scott and Lieutenant Gary Dudley, and actually my friend Bruce Sutton from high school, he was a deputy that was killed in a car crash, is a sacrifice that they make. They all went to work to do a job and never came home. And it leaves a great loss in so many people's lives. And so I have carried this burden really since Scott was killed. But when I started on that journey, just some of my gifts related to law enforcement or remembering Scott or Gary, I have brought their stories to the stage. Again, just another way to remember and to remind people the sacrifice that our law enforcement officers make and their families make each and every day. I mentioned them in my TEDx talk. If you want to go look at that, you can go to YouTube and search Giving Challenge Stephanie Jones TEDx talk. It should come up. And I mention them in that. And I've just had this burden, and I feel like it's only God to give me this burden to keep their memory alive, to tell their story, and to remind people the sacrifices that our officers make. And so fast forward this year in July, one of the topics that I've been speaking on for a while now has been burnout, and because I experienced it greatly. It caused a lot of health issues in my life, and I'm passionate about it. And I think if we are burned out, overcommitted, don't have priorities, is we cannot serve and live out the calling that God has on our life. And so it's been a topic that I'm very passionate about. But I got to see this year, 2025, is as I was going in and doing the workshop for women's leadership groups, or I did at our community foundation for nonprofit leaders, I started hearing like, oh, this would be great for my staff. One, I don't have the ability to go into all these nonprofits or businesses and give this workshop. And so I decided to create a course and asked around, and one of my friends gave me a recommendation of a guy that could come and do the video work so it would be high quality. And I got to even remember it was like the morning that he was supposed to show up, I about canceled because I did not feel prepared. And that is the devil. Whenever you have doubt, like you schedule, you do something, you sign up for something, whatever it is, fill in the blank. It's like the day of, or as it gets closer, doubt starts to creep in. And the doubt, and also lies. The devil starts to tell you lies. You start to hear lies. And one of the lies that came in was, you are not prepared. Like, you need to do more preparation. And a lot of times that we need to do more preparation, we're not prepared, is just an excuse. It's a lie to kick the can down the road. And I think sometimes that's how we miss out on what God is calling us to do, because we get so caught up in the planning and the preparation that we don't take action. We don't execute of what he is calling us to do. And so, that was really my thought. I wanted to cancel because I didn't feel prepared. But then again, I was like, no, this is a lie. Just show up, do your best. We can always, it wasn't like it had to be a one and done, is if I didn't like something, if I wanted to record later, like counter those lies with what reality is. And that was the reality. So this guy, Josh, videographer, shows up, and it was incredible because that lie was a lie. I did every segment in one shoot, because I've been giving this content. I've been speaking about this content from the stage and in workshops and in keynotes for years. So I knew my content that I could present for this course. Anyways, we get to talking about just his job as a videographer and projects that he worked on. And he had mentioned working on documentaries. And there was like something that leapt in my spirit. And if you've ever had this happen, and I pray that if you've had this happen, is you've taken the next step, you've inquired, you be curious about that, you start praying about that. But I shared with him how for probably a decade, I have had a vision I could see in my mind. And that is one of the gifts or the strengths that I have, is I am a visionary. I can kind of see the big picture. I can see everything big. Now, I may not know how to execute it or who to do it. Sometimes I'll just be waiting. So I've seen this documentary in my head really about the murder of my friend Scott Patrick, but I never knew what to do with that. And so when Josh mentioned that he had done documentaries, I told him I had one in my head, and could we meet for coffee? And we ended up doing that, and he loved the idea, loved the story. And we met several other times, and it was something I just prayed about. I really encourage you, if you feel like God is calling you to do something, especially so big that really it's like the only way I am going to be able to accomplish this is only God. Like, there is no way I can do this on my own. I don't know anything about documentaries. I don't know anything about making a film. I know storytelling. I'm an author. I speak from the stage. I would feel like I have the gift of storytelling, but there's a lot that I don't know and never had done. But never let that get in the way of what God is calling you to do, because then you have to be tethered to him. You have to be tethered to the word of God. You have to be tethered to him in prayer, in scripture, your trust, your belief, your faith, in what God is calling you to do. And that's what I did. I knew that once we had thought this is a good idea, and really felt like this is what God was calling me to do, is I would have to call Scott's wife and get her permission, because this wasn't just a story. You can go out and make any story and tell any story, but I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted everybody involved. And also is it was my prayer that if she said no, then this I wasn't supposed to do this, or I wasn't supposed to do this now. So oftentimes when God gives us an idea, or gives us a calling, we start to take the steps, and the door gets closed and we're like, okay, God, I thought I was supposed to be doing this. Sometimes maybe that's not from God, which is why we have to be prayerful and we have to wait expectantly. We have to watch, you know, for kind of next steps. Be specific. I've just been learning over and over again in the years of like, be specific of what you're praying about. And so honestly, I thought I would call Scott's wife and I would get one of two answers. And the one would be is no. And I would respect that. I would understand that. It's been 22 years. And so I was prepared for the no and really okay with that. I was prepared for, I need to think about it. This is a big, as I started working on the project, I was like, oh my gosh, this is big. It is weighty. Obviously I teared up earlier talking about it, but like, I don't know, this subject has always gotten to me. I mean, just thinking about it just brings tears to my eyes. Even though it's been 22 years, it's something that has just always been so emotional to me. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. And I've also been studying of what like trauma and grief. And I read something a couple of weeks ago about like how trauma comes out through our tears, which I thought was interesting. I didn't go down the rabbit hole to see if that's true, but it makes sense. And anyways, but when I called her, like I said, I prayed a lot, but then prayed before I made the phone call. And she said, yes, I love this idea. She's often wanted to tell Scott's story. And because I had built a relationship with her over the last 22 years, there was a trust there. And she knew my heart. And so here I am. Not a lot of people know, but I've spent the last couple of months working on a documentary to honor my friend Scott Patrick. And three themes of it is the power of our choices. A young man at age 19 made a choice to shoot and kill our friend. And that choice, that one choice, had such a ripple effect and impacted people's lives forever, for generations. Two is hope. I want this movie to be a movie of hope for obviously those that have lost loved ones in the line of duty, lost parents, lost spouses, lost, a son, a daughter, a friend. Melissa told me that, after Scott was killed, and I just, wow. I mean, the women that I have met who have lost their husbands in the line of duty, the strength that they have to then go support other women that come behind them, other widows. But she said she was visual hope to other widows, that she was still standing. And I love that. And so that really got in my head of hope. This film could be hope for people that have lost loved ones in the line of duty, or loved ones in general. And then three, which is the biggest topic and the hardest thing, honestly, that I feel like God has been really working on me throughout this movie. And I hope everybody involved, is forgiveness. And how do we forgive somebody that has intentionally taken someone else's life, and somebody that was so good, and someone that Scott was there to help him that day. The guy had a flat tire and Scott was there to help. And to kill a stranger, to not know who he was and what his heart was, and that he was a servant. And he would have done anything for that guy that day. And so that is a real struggle. But it is a topic at the end of the day. If we look at the Bible, Jesus died on the cross to forgive us of our sins, because we live in a sin and fallen world, and we're asked to forgive others. We're asked to pray and love our enemies, which is so, so difficult. So, anyways, that is my only God story today of how, this gal went with a big dream of being an FBI profiler to meeting some really good guys in the police academy through tragedy. Here I am, God is turning me into a filmmaker. And I hope I've started a film company, Shine Forward Films. And it is my prayer that God uses this film and any film that He gives me to do in the future to preach the gospel and to lead others to Him. So thank you so much for listening to my Only God story today. Hey, friends, thank you for joining me today on the Only God podcast. I hope today's story encouraged your faith and reminded you that God is still writing our stories each and every day. If you were inspired by this episode, please share, subscribe, and tell a friend. And to stay connected with me and find out about all my books and resources and events, go to shineforwardcreative.com. Have a fabulous day.